Hi, I'm Robin Hutton, and I'm the author of Sgt Reckless, America's Warhorse, and I am here today to do a PowerPoint presentation to tell you all about this incredible hero that is America's greatest warhorse, and she's also listed in Life magazine as one of our all-time greatest heroes, and you'll learn more about that in a moment. So I'm going to do a PowerPoint and show you some of the pictures that are in my book and tell you some of the fun things that we're doing with Sgt Reckless. And so let me get started. So these are the covers of my two books, Sgt Reckless and War Animals of World War II. Incredible stories about these animals that have served our country from in Korea and in World War II that I think you'll really enjoy. So in 1997, Reckless was listed in Life magazine as one of our all-time greatest heroes with George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa. And yet she had disappeared from the pages of history. When I discovered her story back in 2007, I believe, there were only 4 things that came up on the internet when I Googled her name. And I thought, man, this is a travesty. Because when you hear her story, when you see the pictures, when you understand what this little pony did, you will be amazed, I think, as much as I was, to wonder why and how did this horse disappear. I think I kind of know why, but I have made it my mission to bring her back to the collective and make sure that she has never been forgotten again. And you'll see all about that in just a few minutes as to what we've done. So Reckless would carry ammunition for the recoilless rifle platoon. And this gentleman right here in this picture, this is Lieutenant Eric Pedersen. And Lieutenant Eric Pedersen is the one that purchased Reckless for his platoon. Her Korean name was Ah-Chim Hae, and called Flame in the Morning or Morning Sun. And so he paid $250 of his own money to buy this horse for his men because, as you can see, it was very difficult to carry this gun up the hill. Pedersen thought that if he could get an animal or a pack animal to help his men, that would be amazing. And so that's when he went to the Seoul racetrack. The gun is called a Reckless rifle because you had to have a little bit of recklessness to be associated with it. It's also a contraction of its name. But you can see in this picture on the below, you can see the back blast here, and that would show the enemy where you were firing from. And so you could only fire maybe 2, 3, 4 at the most if you were firing really fast. And then you'd have to pick up the gun and run to another part of the hill. Otherwise, you would be hit with incoming fire from the enemy. And so it was a very dangerous weapon to be associated with. It weighed about 106 pounds, and it was a very big gun, an anti-tank weapon, as you can see the men trying to carry it up. So on October 26, 1952, Lieutenant Pedersen went to the Seoul racetrack looking for his pack horse. And there he found Reckless. And she was in a stall, and she was owned by a young Korean man named Kim Huk-moon. And when he saw her, he couldn't believe how beautiful and refined she was and how well Kim had taken care of her. He'd really taken great care of her because he loved this horse, and this was going to be his racehorse when the war ended. And because Reckless was bred to be a racehorse on the tracks of Seoul. So when Pedersen saw her, she actually came up to him, and he saw how well taken care of he was. And he offered the man $250 of his own money. It was his own money that he used. And the only reason Kim Huk-moon sold his beloved horse to the Marines was to buy an artificial leg for his sister, Chung-soon, who lost her leg in a landmine accident during the war. And so this money would help her tremendously to get on with her life and have a better life. And so he gave Reckless up for $250. When they got to camp, they didn't know what to call her, so they named her Reckless. And Pedersen wondered who in camp knew how to work with horses. And Gunnery Sergeant Joe Latham said, "Sir, I can do it." And so Joe was responsible for putting Reckless through hoof camp. It's the equine version of boot camp. And here are some of the amazing pictures. They had to train her to get in and out of this trailer. Joe taught her to lay down, to run to her bunker and get down when there was incoming fire. He taught her how to step over communication wires and look for barbed wire. She was afraid of barbed wire. And they would take her, they would walk her, this far picture on the right here, they would walk her up and down the hills with the ammunition that she would carry on her back so she could get used to carrying that weight and get a feel as to what she was going to have to do. The men absolutely loved her, and they became her herd, and she would follow them anywhere. On cold nights, she would sleep in their tents with them. If it was raining or if it was cold, she would sleep there with them near the fire. She ate in their mess tent. She absolutely loved bacon and eggs. She'd chase it down with a cup of coffee. How she didn't colic is anybody's guess, but she was just this amazing character, and she loved sharing a beer with her men after a hard day's work. So each round of the ammunition weighed 24 pounds. And here on the left side picture, you can see the men strapping them to her saddle. They would tie it onto the sawbuck there. And all of the pictures we have with her canisters are of 4 rounds at a time. But during the heat of battle, she would carry up to 8 rounds at a time, sometimes even 10 rounds. So her baptism of fire was late November 1952. They had no idea what she was going to do, but because they couldn't train her for the sound of the noise and the backblast. They didn't want to waste the rounds of ammunition. So all they could do was just be there for her during the shooting. The firing mission. So that said that the first time the gun went off, she was loaded down with 6 rounds and she went straight up in the air off of all fours. And she's pulling back and she's shaking and she's just really, really frightened. And Monroe Coleman was her handler at that time. And he's talking to her and he's telling her what a good pony she is and not to worry. The gun goes off again and up she goes again off of all fours. And again, he's trying to calm her down. And the third time it went off, she just kind of twitched a little bit because she's kind of getting used to it and knew that he wouldn't let anything hurt her. By the end of the firing mission, she was so comfortable that she wasn't going to be harmed in any way that they found her over sniffing at a hole for a helmet liner that she found. And so they knew that she had gotten quite comfortable with the gun that quickly and that she was going to be okay, which is utterly amazing. So there were several firing missions in the winter of 1953. At the end of January, she'd been on others besides these. These are just the big ones where she did a lot and carried a lot, but there were smaller missions along the way. But these were all kind of getting her prepared for her next really big mission, her day of destiny, I guess you could say, which was the Battle of the Nevada Cities in March of 1953. This was a 5-day battle from the 26th of March to the 30th. She started in on the 27th. The next day, what happened was on March 26th, the men were up on the outpost. She was working with the guys that were working up on Outpost Vegas. Only 45 to 50 men were on an outpost at a given time. And on the night of the 26th, 3,500 Chinese and communist North Koreans descended on all of these outposts. So the outposts were not able to help each other defend themselves. They had to do it themselves. They could only take care of their own. And so they were immediately overrun and taken over that first night. And then Reckless started her mission the next day. And it's amazing what this little horse had done. And this battle at the time was one of the most savage battles in Marine Corps history. And if you think of Iwo Jima or Bella Wood or some of those other images of battles from like World War II, you get an idea of the enormity of this particular battle that happened on the Nevada cities. So Reckless' finest hour came during this battle. They would lead her up to the guns to show her the way, but this battle was so fierce that she would have to make the trips most of the time by herself. And in this particular battle in one day, she made 51 trips up to the guns, mostly alone. They would strap the ammunition on her, give her a slap, and up the hill she would go. When she got to the guns, they took the ammunition off, give her a slap, and down the hill she went. And she did this time and time again. She walked 35 miles up and down these hills and across open rice paddies. and carried 386 rounds of ammunition, which is over 9,000 pounds on her back. That's almost 5 tons of ammunition this little horse carried on her back. It was such a fierce battle. It was so chaotic, and horses usually flee from the chaos, and Reckless ran right towards it. But with 500 rounds a minute, you couldn't tell on the radar screen what was coming and what was going. It was just a blur. And so the rounds would collide midair, and they would rain down on the troops like fireworks. And so Reckless was actually hit with falling shrapnel. She was hit in the forehead, and she was hit in the left flank. But that didn't stop her. When Joe Latham saw the wounds, he dressed them, and she was still able to go back to work. She even carried wounded off the battlefield. We don't know how many wounded she carried, but in my book, I talk about during all these battles, I have at least 3 verified cases of her carrying wounded down off the battlefield, which was really, really something. And this battle broke the spine of the enemy. By the end of the 5th day, everybody was able to take back the outposts, the main line of resistance, which had they broken through from these outposts, the enemy would have had a direct charge to Seoul, and we would have had quite a different outcome at that point. And because of this, because the Marines they were able to stay on these outposts and claim them and fight back the enemy, the war ended just a few months later in July. And a lot of that credit was given to Reckless because of what she was able to do in that battle in carrying all this ammunition up. It was amazing. So the war ends on July 27th, 1953. Reckless was actually promoted to corporal sometime in here because of her heroics. The picture here of her having a beer is with Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Gere. And Andrew Gere would be the one to really take her story on. He was a big writer back in his day. He wrote movie scripts with John Wayne. He did Great Barrier Reef and Sands of Iwo Jima. And he just wrote a lot of different stories. And he wrote the original book on Sgt Reckless that came out. But here, this was right after the war ended, and they went out and celebrated, of course, with the beer. So Reckless was promoted in Korea. Her men started leaving her after the war ended and the armistice was signed. And so new people came in to take care of her and became her friends. But she was promoted to sergeant on April 10th, 1954. So a week later, after her promotion to sergeant, Andrew Gere wrote an article, and it was in the Saturday Evening Post, and it appeared on April 17th, 1954. Now remember, all of the men that she served with in the battles a year before were gone, essentially. And so the end of the article stated that Reckless was still trapped on the hills of South Korea with the hopes of coming home one day. Well, when this article appeared, there was a national outcry to get this horse home. What happened was an executive, Stan Koppel, at one of the shipping lines, saw the article, and his kids made him promise that he would do everything to get Reckless home. So he offered free transportation if the Marines could get her to Japan and get home. And so on October 17th, 1954, they gave her a rotation ceremony, and they did everything they could to send her off in grand fashion. And it was just a glorious day. And so she got on the ship in Japan, and she arrived in America on November 10th, 1954. Now, that just happens to be Marine Corps birthday. You can't make this stuff up. She actually touches American soil here in this bottom picture on Marine Corps birthday, 1954. And she was guest of honor at the Marine Corps birthday that night in San Francisco. She had more press turn out for her on the docks of San Francisco than then Vice President Nixon did a couple of weeks earlier. I mean, she was a rock star. And so everybody poured out to see her and to support her. So she goes to the Marines Memorial Club in San Francisco. She waltzes through the hotel, gets in the elevator, and goes up to the 10th floor to the celebration. She waltzes into the ballroom. They said flash bulbs went off like mortar shells. There were so many people trying to take her picture and everything. And just as she got through the door, she spies the anniversary cake, and she goes trotting over to it, and she's up to her nostrils in it before the guys can get a hold of her. But that was okay because they had another cake upstairs for the grand celebration of when they do the grand honor of giving the first piece of cake to the honored Marine in the room, and that was Reckless. And here is Kay Pedersen, Lieutenant Eric Pedersen's wife, giving her the first piece of cake. And then the bottom picture here is Kate and Eric with Reckless. And then when she finished with the cake, she started in on the centerpieces, of course. And I mean, she was just this amazing, funny character. So the next day they take her down, they drive her down to Camp Pendleton, where she is going to live out her days. So at Camp Pendleton, she was promoted twice to Staff Sergeant. The first time was with Colonel Richard Rothwell, and her little colt Fearless is at this ceremony to honor his mom as well. This was in '57, and then 2 years later, the pay grades changed. And so they used that moment to promote her again to an E6, to Staff Sergeant. And the gentleman pinning on her Staff Sergeant stripes here is the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the #1 Marine in the country, and that is General Rand McCall Pate, who pinned on her sergeant stripes in Korea. There was a 19-gun salute in his honor with Reckless standing there, and then a parade of troops, parade of 1,500 troops marched by them to pay their respects and to honor them. She retired the following year on Marine Corps birthday, 1960. And in lieu of retirement pay, she would have room and board for the rest of her life at Camp Pendleton, all the oats she could eat. Well, Reckless died on May 13th, 1968, and she was buried with full military honors down by the Step Stables on base at Camp Pendleton. This was the only marker for her on base when I discovered her story and went down to learn her story. So when I saw this, I knew that there was more that I wanted to do for Reckless, that she needed a monument. And so in July 2013, the very first monument for Reckless right here at the National Museum of the Marine Corps was dedicated. Down here, the second monument was in 2016. That's at Camp Pendleton, and we also have a marker for her at Camp Pendleton. And our third one is at the Kentucky Horse Park up in Lexington, Kentucky. And she is at the International Museum of the Horse, and she stands alongside all of the great horses. The fourth one is in Fort Worth, Texas, at the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame. And that was dedicated last year in November of 2019. There's one more that is in Barrington Hills, Illinois, that is on a farm, private farm that works with veterans with PTSD, and they work with horses. And so she stands as a symbol. And there will be one in Ocala, Florida at the World Equestrian Center next year in 2021. And we're hoping to get her to South Korea as well. So in all of this time, I had discovered in doing research how to honor this horse. What else can we do besides the monuments? And in 2016, I had applied, nominated Reckless for the PDSA Dickin Medal. This medal is the greatest award an animal can receive for gallantry and bravery on the battlefield. And this had been given starting in World War II. It's a British medal. It's known as the Victoria Cross for animals. Reckless was the first American horse to get it. She is the first horse since World War II to get it, and the fourth horse in total. The other three horses were given it together during World War II. for their work. And so it was an amazing, amazing honor for Reckless to receive this medal. And so when I was over in England, I kept asking, why doesn't America have this kind of medal? Why don't we do something like this to honor our incredible animals? Because there's nothing like that here. And so last year in November, we instituted the brand new Animals in War and Peace Medal of Bravery. This was up on Capitol Hill. Members of Congress presented the medal. We had this specially made. The medal company that makes the Dickin medal also designed and made ours. And Reckless was awarded Medal of Bravery #1. Even though she was the third war, I had a little pull, so I made sure she got Medal of Bravery #1. And it was such a great day down here receiving the medal on her behalf. Former Senator John Warner presented the medal to Mike Mason, who actually served with Reckless over in Korea after the armistice was signed. And Mike loves this horse and has done so much for preserving her memory and attends all kinds of parades and functions that we have to honor her any way we can. And so it's just been this amazing ride, an incredible, incredible ride honoring this horse. And her medal will be on display in a new museum that we are putting together, the International War Animals Museum. We hope to put it in Washington, D.C. area, but we'll also have traveling exhibits, but they will be on display at that time. But anyway, that pretty much sums it up. If you want to, here are my phone numbers and emails and websites you can go to. But let me see if I can get out of this and just kind of say goodbye. But anyway, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so very, very blessed to have this little horse in my life. She has changed my life in ways that I can't even explain to you. And in doing the Dickin medal, I was fortunate enough to find out all of the other stories of the animals that received the Dickin medal, and was so blown away by what they had done that my latest book, War Animals, The Unsung Heroes of World War II, talks about all those animals that received the Dickin medal, but also our American animals that worked so hard and valiantly in World War II. And I will be starting to do podcasts on them as well. And so just keep coming back to the website to read more and learn more about these amazing animals. I just can't get enough of them, and I can't honor them enough. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me. And please, please, please pick up the book. Go to sgtreckless.com to learn all about Reckless's story and to see pictures of the different monuments and the celebrations and some of the fun things that we've done to honor her, like being in the National Memorial Day Parade. But we also have races for her at the various top racetracks. Like Pimlico is running the fifth running of the Sgt Reckless Memorial Dash, hopefully this year. And so it's just an amazing, amazing ride with this little horse. And so I just want to thank you all so much for joining me. Please check out her book and the website, and waranimals.com. You can check out those animals as well. And also our Medal of Bravery ceremony is on there. And thank you so, so very much for joining me and learning all about Sgt Reckless, America's greatest war horse.